Hello and welcome back to another episode of VHS Era. After watching the VHS opening for Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, I realized I needed something a little more adult. So I have decided that for this episode, I'm going to get someone who is actually involved in children's movie marketing to talk about the VHS opening for his favorite movie, Out of Sight. Welcome, Alex, to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, out of all the movies in the world, why is Out of Sight your favorite all-time movie? Because I watched it a few days ago and it's great, but
No, I get it. It's for a variety of reasons. One of which is uh genre wise, it's kind of my favorite. It's my favorite entry in a subgenre that I champion. I sort of nickname it loser noir, which is it's got all the touch points of noir cinema. It's cool to look at, it's cool to experience, but the central characters are just they're a little more underdogs
Mhm.
than you might. Not that that's uncommon in noir, but there's it's sort of a fun duality of watching a very slick presentation of something that's still got this kind of wounded soul to it, and this kind of almost like a self-deprecation, like a lack of self-confidence, which is a really funny thing to watch a performer like George Clooney pull off, but he does pull it off. That's a big part of it. That it's the genre that it belongs to. I love Elmore Leonard. I love Elmore Leonard's books. I love also when a filmmaker can take one of his books, which adapt very well to movies, but they need adaptation. Like you can't just as cinematic as his books feel on the page. There is a shape to them that works really well as novels, but that needs a lot of conscious effort brought to make them movie shaped. And Scott Frank, who wrote Out of Sight, is, I think, pretty much our best practitioner of that. He had written Get Shorty before this, and this was actually meant to be a reunion of the Get Shorty creative team. Barry Sonnenfeld was going to direct it. And instead, but he had just hit huge with Men in Black and instead opted to ride that blockbuster train somewhat literally to Wild Wild West, to Your Mileage May Vary returns. But it was going to reteam Barry Sonnenfeld, Scott Frank, and John Travolta for this one. And I think John Travolta might have done a good job of it, but it would have been a very different movie, obviously, with Sonnenfeld at the helm, because he tends toward a goofier aesthetic. But instead, it became uh, uh, this God, I'm blanking on word. It's very early here in Los Angeles, so give me a moment. I'll have words by the end of this. It became a reboot for Steven Soderbergh, who had had a lot of very early success in his career with Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and then sort of had some diminishing returns on some stranger but still really interesting projects, and then found himself in sort of the Hollywood hinterlands and wasn't really satisfied as a director for hire. So he retreated back to Georgia, began working with a theater company, and from that grew a movie called Schizopolis, which is largely improvised, really fascinating. But it was a creative reset for him. And then immediately after that, he got booked by Jersey Films to make Out of Sight, and he brought this whole new style and aesthetic to it that really became the footprint for so much of what he's done since then. So you've got so you've got a genre I love. You've got um, source material that I love, a creative team that I love, and then you've got this element of surprise where George Clooney, who had been sort of had a couple of false starts as stepping into movie stardom out of TV from ER, because he'd done Batman and Robin, which your mileage, speaking of your mileage, may vary. And I don't think any problems that people have with that movie, I don't think you can really count Clooney as part of them because he's a great idea for a Batman. He's just lost in that, really overdone movie. He had tried with The Peacemaker, which didn't really happen. One Fine Day, like he hadn't found his groove yet. And this partnership with Soderbergh, which was the first of 7 or 8 movies that they wound up doing together. It's like they both really clicked with each other. And I remember seeing this movie thinking, you know what, I had read the novel, I was excited for it. The key art for it is my favorite movie poster, pretty much of all time. It's this great retro look, which unfortunately has almost never been used for box art. It definitely wasn't used on the VHS, and I was like, why? You have like the perfect. But anyway, I was excited for the movie, and then but I was not prepared for how much it was going to return that excitement. And this was a big summer release. It came out June of 1998, sort of equidistant between Roland Emmerich's Godzilla and Michael Bay's Armageddon. Really strange company to be in. But Universal went for it. The movie did underperform. It probably would have done better in the spring or the fall. But I just know that I went in on this Friday night and was like, yeah, well, we'll see. I'm excited about this. We'll see how it goes. And the return on investment of excitement so far exceeded what my excitement could have been. And I was like that it was a movie I didn't know that I had been waiting for. And it was put right in front of me. And it just kind of rewired me sort of on the spot. I think we've all had that experience with movies where it's just like our levels get reset in real time. And I've kind of been chasing that high ever since. And for 25 years, others have definitely come close, but this one's still the champ for me.
Yeah. Now, when it had come out on VHS, did you buy the VHS though?
I didn't, because for a couple of reasons. One, I had just moved to New York and was exceedingly broke. This was not a sell through title, so it would have been the way, I'm sure you've discussed this on the show before, but the way it would have worked was this sort of tiered system where your gigantic blockbusters, your Godzillas, your Armageddons would have hit the video market as sell-through titles, meaning they were priced for you to buy them the day they were released on home video. Other titles would have a rental window first so that the studio could make more money off of fewer copies, and the sale price was set usually somewhere at like $80-90. Like which was more of like a unit price for a video store, so that Blockbuster would buy 6 copies of Out of Sight for about like $500, and then they would rent those copies, and get their return on investment that way. So Out of Sight was not priced for sell through, so I didn't buy it on VHS. What I did, I was working at a video store at the time, but I also had an internship at the Tribeca Film Center. So what I did, and I am confessing to this here, I managed to get my hands on a VHS Academy screener, which we were allowed to borrow from work at the Tribeca Film Center, and I borrowed it and forgot to return it. So I sort of eliminated the middleman there. Got myself a nice VHS copy of Out of Sight, which, by the way, the for your consideration copy had the proper key art on the cover, which the at-home version did not. So not my proudest moment, but no regrets.
Okay. Well, today we are going to be watching the copy that most people had rented, and hopefully we'll get a better set of trailers than the last 2 episodes.
We can hope. We can definitely hope.
Okay, so of all the soundtrack commercials that have been on this show, this is probably the best and most unique.
I'm so sorry to hear that about the best part, because I have thoughts, but go on.
Okay. Well, I just thought, like, how do I say this? I just thought the music fit nicely with the tone, the tone, that they're trying to go for, especially when it comes to representing the soundtrack of the movie. It didn't, it wasn't over edited, but there was at least an attempt at some style, while the other soundtrack commercials have either been the Scream one, which was obnoxious, and the Mask one, which was just the music video for Escape, uh, and the narrator talking over it. And the last one, the Scooby-Doo one, which wasn't even for Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, it was just a rando Scooby-Doo CD. But you seem to disagree, so what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are, uh, I didn't mention when I was talking about the creative team earlier. I didn't mention David Holmes, who composed the soundtrack for Out of Sight, the score for Out of Sight, and produced the soundtrack. And it's an unbelievably great movie score. Like it is. I have been low key petitioning Stacy Snyder, not Stacy Snyder, Stacy Scher. Wait, I forget all of this. I've been low key producing one of the Jersey Films partners who I have like a tenuous online connection with to be like, hey, can we get a vinyl release of the soundtrack finally? Because 25 years later, we don't have it. This was the first pairing, the first partnership of Steven Soderbergh and David Holmes, who became one of his recurring collaborators. Did the Oceans trilogy, um, plus a few others that have been pretty spectacular, and they bring out great work in each other. So it's a great soundtrack. It is one I listened to endlessly while I was waiting for the movie to come out on home video, or in my case, waiting for your consideration VHS that I could steal. Um, it's a great soundtrack. I do not blame them for trying to publicize it. The whole thing to me feels like, though, we have this opportunity uh, to promote the soundtrack, to get that ancillary money, which used to be a thing that not only in partnership with the physical media that you've just rented or bought, but it's like, hey, we would like you to spend, here's another way we can spend even more money on our movie, helping us recoup our costs, which just doesn't exist anymore. I do want to take a second to just think about how great an artifact this is, that we're talking about a promotional material on one physical medium promoting to another physical medium, both of which you used to be able to really make money off of, and both of which have sadly kind of uh, passed by the wayside. So RIP to their passing. But back to what you're saying about why I feel like it's not the strongest promo is, it really looks to me like they look, I make promos for a living, and I have respect and empathy for everybody who does it. It looks to me like the kind of promo, though, where they did the best they could with what they had, which in this case was the couple of bits of key art, and the licensed fonts, in the graphics package for the movie. It's the sort of thing, though, where it's like, to me, the score of the movie fits the vibe of the footage so well that it's like I would have rather seen like a footage sizzle with the artist's names is like keyable type over it, instead of this much less dynamic sort of screensavery vibe. But it suggests to me that like that would be expensive. They, even in the case of something like where they're marketing to their own content, they might have to license their own footage. It's a thing we come up against all the time with footage and with music. So I sympathize. I don't know that anybody involved in the production of that promo wound up with the exact thing that they wanted when they set out. So they have my sympathies. I just think the finished product, it does an okay job of marketing what they're trying to market. I just think they've got, to my opinion, one of the strongest products in its field at the time, using footage from another of the strongest in that field. And that's that's how I would have done it if I can be a 25 years later Monday morning quarterback.
Love comes to you and you follow.
Points for being creative, but yeah, I've never seen that movie. I've heard of it, but that didn't really sell me on it at all. What did you think?
I've got to disagree with you. I've never seen Buffalo '66 either. I've actually never seen a Vincent Gallo movie. I find him to be just a real weird guy. And but that one kind of sucked me in. I liked the technique of the trailer, and I actually thought that at first I thought that sort of header section where it's a run of who appears in the movie, I thought that was really intriguing, and I thought, oh well, if it just ended with that, like that would have definitely baited the hook for me. And then it went on, and at first, at my first reaction, I went on a whole journey with this just now, by the way, because I don't know that I've ever seen that trailer before, or if I have, it's been a long time. But I felt like at first when it got into the stills of different moments from the movie, I thought, well, they could have just ended it with the run of who's in it, and could have left it teaser trailer length and it would have been fine. But the more time I spent in it, I became really kind of fascinated by the technique. I thought it created sort of a pervasive vibe, which for the first time in 25 years actually piqued my curiosity about maybe I should check out this movie. So, day late and a dollar short, but I guess it got the job done.
Oh, God. My mom is throwing a surprise party for my dad's birthday, and it's tonight.
Mom is your favorite literary figure.
I'm just not up to dealing with her. You know I can't do costumes.
Why?
Just so...
Human?
Mom. They're so cute. Gimme.
We have the Halloween festival for the kids. We have Thanksgiving, a benefit for the older people. And then we have to decorate all the Christmas trees in town square.
Hi.
Happy birthday, Dad. Did you get a chance to look at my latest piece?
Yes. Writer to writer. Less is more.
Your dad always says less is more. To me, more is more.
Mom?
Gonna have to have surgery.
She's going to die?
No, she's not going to die. I want you to move home and take care of her.
Move home? I cannot just drop everything. It could ruin my career. We can get a nurse, and I will come home every
Nurse,
weekend.
we're not getting a nurse. Your
Dad-
mother needs you, Ellen.
A sick mother means 3 weeks off and a very nice arrangement of flowers sent by the staff.
Ellie, you're home. I'm home for a while.
No. Not to play nursemaid to me.
Show me how. It can't be that hard. Ellie made the lunch. Mom!
How would you feel about writing an introduction to my collected essays?
I would love to.
And wait, could you wash these for me? No starch.
How do you do this every day in this house and no one notices?
Ellen, I'm going to be working late tonight.
There is nothing that you know about your father that I don't know.
Why won't you participate in the most important thing in your life?
Have you lost your mind?
I am just tired. Being my mother is very tiring.
Well, I've been afraid of changing.
What has happened between you and your father? You're so alike.
Please don't say that.
The first time I saw your mother, she was so filled with light.
From the acclaimed best-selling novel by Pulitzer Prize winner Anna Quindlen, Meryl Streep, William Hurt, and Renee Zellweger in a Carl Franklin film.
They're the ones who love you. That's what counts.
One True Thing.
So that movie looked very, very okay to me. Like the kind of movie say, it's not my thing, but my mom might like it.
Yeah, it's a kind of movie that doesn't really exist as a theatrical release anymore. It's much more of a streaming original. It's as we were going into it, I was struck by, first of all, a couple of very 90s totems of having Nicky Katt and Tom Everett Scott in it. Tom Everett Scott, I know, still works a lot. Nicky Katt much more sporadically. And at first, I actually thought I thought I saw Nicky Katt, and then in the next shot, I was like, oh, no, wait, it's Tom Everett Scott. Then it turns it's both of them. But I was sitting there. This is a movie I had forgotten it existed until you just hit play on this, and I couldn't remember for the life of me if was this the song that brought Landslide back into the zeitgeist, or was it Stepmom with Susan Sarandon and Julia Roberts, which came out, I want to say ballpark the same 6-month window, and they were. It turns out it was this. And it really, like, that was, I had never been much of a Fleetwood Mac fan coming up, so that was like my first exposure to it. And suddenly that song was everywhere. As a consequence, I think more of this trailer even than the movie itself, which I don't remember having much of an impact. But it's interesting watching it now because it's very much, it and Stepmom kind of belong to a similar subgenre, which is that, you know, the Gen X coming of age with the dying boomer figure, and Renee Zellweger, who had very much been like, you know, over the previous years, she had gone from the Empire Records music clerk to the Jerry Maguire single mom, now to the mother, the daughter dealing with a dying parent and maybe what I'm guessing is an unfaithful father. If only because it's based on a novel and he works in literature and academia, so that is just like shorthand for he's cheating on his wife. So it's interesting because that was a subgenre that I think never really quite caught on. But I'm realizing now was the envelope that as a Gen Xer I was sort of meant to slide into, especially when only a few months after that came the onset of like the millennial teen comedy, your She's All That's and 10 Things is and whatnot. So I think I was supposed to fit into that pocket, and it just never really clicked with me. And this trailer, like you say, makes it look very okay. Carl Franklin has made some really interesting movies. This one does not jump off the screen at me as being one of them.
Yeah, though Interesting you mentioned how it seemed like Renee Zellweger matured quickly when it comes to her roles, because the same is true of Christina Ricci. Like around the same time, she was doing movies like Buffalo 66, where she was much more sexualized at that time. And then just a few years back, she was like doing Casper and Now and Then and like tween roles. So it's kind of weird how it seemed like she made the jump from 12 to 18, like out of nowhere.
I don't know if you've been listening to this season of You Must Remember This, but it's incredible. And she's Karina Longworth has done the whole season has been about sex in 90s pop culture, particularly when it comes to movies. And she's done a number of episodes about the Lolita element of 90s pop culture. And I think what you're describing fits that perfectly, because whether Buffalo 66, which again I'm not really familiar with, but around the same time Christina Ricci was also in The Opposite of Sex, which is not really not what you would think of it. Like, I seem to remember that the key art for that was strongly featured Christina Ricci in a bikini, but the movie is much more discursive. It's more of a discussion about sex than actually featuring sex, and has a very mature perspective on a lot of its subject matter. It's a very funny movie, a very warm movie, but I think again was trying to key into that 90s era Lolita thing that was going on, which I wouldn't say applies to Renee Zellweger, because she always sort of, this is going to sound like damning with faint praise, and it's not how I mean it, but she was always sort of on that maturity arc. Even in Empire Records, where she's playing this very sexualized, like late teen, early 20s character. I'm not really sure what the age of the character is supposed to be, so I'm going to watch my words very carefully. But even then, it was with this sense of like, or at least for me, it brought with it, all the kids in Empire Records were meant to be sort of like that Gen X big brother, big sister, where it's like they're just a little bit cool and a little bit older and a little bit more hip and a little bit more ahead of things. So to have her follow that arc feels a lot more natural. The Christina Ricci thing does feel a little bit more of playing into a pretty regrettable fetish that was going on at the time.
Yeah, I agree. But hopefully
I hope we're doing better now. I can't tell, but I hope we're doing better now.
Yeah. Hopefully our next movie is also something that has a lot to do with fetishes. Let's watch.
Hey, that's great they promoted you. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Are you assisting Dominique too?
No, I'm not really assisting anyone. I'm the assistant editor.
Did you get a raise?
It's not about a raise.
This is Lucy Berliner. I just brought it in for Harry to look at.
I love Lucy Berliner.
How do you know her?
We're neighbors. She really wants you to do a piece, probably the cover. A wonderful thing about you, ambition, focus. The people at Frame think you're an amazing photographer.
You remember Sid?
How can I forget Sid? You're really at the center of it all now.
And that's what you think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's what it seems like.
It's not meaningless to me. This is what I care about.
I need to get out of town right now.
We have a deadline.
We'll get something into them. Trust me, okay? Just come with me.
Can I take pictures of you? You look really sexy, actually. It's hot in here.
No, you're hot.
Now, there's a movie that I think could potentially be interesting to me, a movie about ambition and what we do to achieve it, a portrayal of the LGBTQ back in the late 90s that doesn't look negative. I'd be interested in seeing this sometime. What about you, Alex?
Okay, so here's what's funny is I've seen that movie. It's been a very long time, but when I first moved to New York, my roommate at the time, who's an old like we'd known each other, old friend of mine, we'd known each other since middle school. We're still friends to this day. She's gay, and she like practically insisted. She's like, we got to go see this movie. She had already seen it. She's like, she was dying to see it again. So we went and saw it, and it was interesting because I was coming from a pretty regular suburban existence, growing up just outside of Baltimore. This is the sort of movie that might have made it to like the one art house theater that existed when I was growing up in Baltimore, and had like a very brief run. But even then, to your point, like LGBTQ content in at any point in the 90s was just really not it was extraordinarily niche. So the fact that like I I was now living in New York, I was living in the East Village, that I could just walk down the street to the Quad Cinema and just go see this movie, like that felt very forward, very bohemian to me, which I know this is not about what my feelings are, but you know, I'm the one who's here. What's interesting is that trailer, I think, is not lying about the movie, but it is sort of misrepresenting it.
Oh.
It's playing up. It is a very human drama. It is a very straightforward, but it's very much a movie that, in part because of its straightforwardness, it tells a very slice of life kind of story. The characters, to my recollection, their motivations are very normal, very human. There is not a lot. It's not undramatic, but it's about the high drama of just regular life. And as a trailer producer, I can totally understand the difficulty of presenting that, especially getting over that hump, getting over that 90s cynicism toward LGBTQ content. So they've made a trailer that feels much more backstabby, much more almost like teetering into thriller territory than the movie actually is. I think they my guess is, and I was not there for the production of this trailer, but my guess is they didn't necessarily know how to sell the movie on its own merits. So they looked to a couple of things that would have been much more in the zeitgeist at the time. Bound was only a couple of years old at that point. And also you've got Neil LaBute was sort of emerging at that point, kind of valorizing professional backstabbing as a marketable thing. He had, I believe, his second or third feature, Your Friends and Neighbors, came out around the same time as this. Before we all realized, like, wait a minute, he's trash, and his opinions are not valid at all. But I think the people behind this trailer took what, to their credit, is a difficult to sell movie because it is very straightforward. It doesn't, to my recollection, does not have a very stylized soundtrack or aesthetic, or is very well made, but it's not. There's nothing noir about the movie, to my recollection, and they made a noir trailer out of it because that's a very good and convenient way to sell it. I'm sorry to disappoint you, that the trailer appealed to you, and here I am telling you the movie is nothing like that. I mean that in a very positive way. The movie is very well worth seeing. It was the first time I'd seen Radha Mitchell in anything, and she's incredible in it. Ali Sheedy, who I'd known from much more teen centric 80s stuff. She gives an incredible dramatic performance in it. I mean, like I said, I've seen this movie once, and it was 25, like basically 25 years ago last week, more or less. And things about it still have stuck in my mind.
Okay, well, thank you for the warning. It's nothing like how the trailer portrays it, but like the way you're saying it really is, I'm still interested. And honestly, it's just more the themes that seemed interesting to
Absolutely.
me. So At
Well,
least
and
once.
it
Yeah.
I do want to throw one more shout out before we move on to whatever's next. The movie was it was written and directed by Lisa Cholodenko, who has not worked enough to my satisfaction. But she made The Kids Are All Right in 2010. She made Laurel Canyon after this, which is kind of which is a little bit forgotten. It has a pre-Batman Christian Bale, a great performance from Frances McDormand. Um, Lisa Cholodenko is really good at making these very human stories, often LGBTQ themed, I suppose, or about LGBTQ characters, about the fluidity of sexuality, about a very real sense of the heart wanting what it wants, and this there's kind of a neat trilogy there with those three movies that I just mentioned. So yeah, I can't recommend this movie enough.
All right. Well, we're on to our final trailer, which, don't judge me, but this is actually the only movie I've seen. And
Ever. You've seen
No,
only
no,
one
no.
movie in the world. It's this one.
No, the only movie on these lists of
I had a
trailers
feeling.
I've seen.
I had a feeling.
And I you're probably not gonna like what it is.
Brown at the 10, the 5, touchdown!
In a world where professional sports had sunk to a new low, two guys invented a game
Yes! Home run, that's 3-1, dude.
that took them to the big time.
Hard to believe that just 5 years ago, this game was played only on driveways.
And it's hard to believe just 5 years ago, those girls were only in grade school.
From the director of The Naked Gun and starring the creators of South Park.
What an unfortunate thing to happen on Dozen Egg Night.
Comes a story about their rise to stardom.
Would you mind signing these?
Sure. Oh.
The fans who adored them.
Joey, look who's here.
My biological father?
And the forces
Players of your caliber should be making the big bucks, don't you agree?
that drove them apart.
Dude, you turned down Kane's offer without even talking to us.
Dude, I'm not gonna cave in. Dude! 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 Dude. Well, I guess you've got a point there.
Universal Pictures presents
I love kids. Heads up, big guy.
Ah, needs a little work on the hands.
He's blind, Doug.
Trey Parker,
You guys, here's your guys on fire.
Matt Stone,
Guess I'll take my shot now.
Yasmin Bleeth,
Here, open your blouse and say ah.
Reamer.
Jenny McCarthy,
I finally got all the chrome off this for you.
Robert Vaughn,
It's nice. Very nice.
You want me to start on this one?
and Academy Award winner Ernest Borgnine. This summer, experience the passion and the triumph.
I'm the king of the world! Yeah!
Basketball.
I don't think I've ever been this excited.
You're excited? Feel these nipples.
Yeah, so I did find that movie funny when I saw it, but I was also 14 and I haven't seen it since.
I've never actually seen that one in its entirety. I've caught bits of it on cable. It never really jumped off the shelf at me. You want to talk about fitting in the pocket of Gen X and Boomers? The fact that you've got Trey Parker and Matt Stone working with the Airplane guys. I mean, I can see how on paper that feels like, at the time, a match made in heaven. And I know this movie has its adherents. It's got a fan base the way any comedy would. It does not appeal to me. But trailers go, that is, God, like someone were to come up to me and ask me for a snapshot of 1998, I would absolutely show them that trailer, because you've got the Don LaFontaine VO, you've got we were just talking about Lolita fetishizing. You've got a bit of that in there. You've got Bob Costas. You've got novelty drop-ins from Robert Vaughn and Ernest Borgnine. Yasmin Bleeth, the South Park guys, including that clip of Trey Parker doing the Cartman voice, because that's at that time that would have been a point and look moment in the trailer, like, ah, that's the guy, he does that thing. And yeah, I mean, I think pretty it's pretty indicative. It has a Titanic joke in there, which that joke never gets old. Yeah, I just think if you needed a snapshot of what studio comedies were doing in the late '90s, I feel like that one really sums it up for you, for good or ill.
Yeah, and as you were saying, how it really is a snapshot of the late '90s culture, like, back in the late '90s, before Matt and Trey tried to make South Park, and just to an extent, their whole brand, fart jokes, but we got a point at the end.
Yeah.
Like that just pretty much focused on the slapstick and fart jokes and everything else. Low bro part of their brand. Again, I haven't seen Basketball since I was 14, but I seem to remember they try to have like an anti-commercialization message in the movie, and besides that one like line at the beginning, sports have lost their way, you wouldn't know that from watching that trailer.
Right. Yeah, I feel like they were not interested in it's a trailer that doesn't sell the premise of the movie especially well. It just gives you the vibe, and that's okay too. That is totally viable. I think you're seeing in some of these jokes, if there's an by the way, if there's an anti-commercial message in this movie, the movie itself does not deliver that, because you've got two guys who have just created this runaway hit on Comedy Central making this movie, because they can, and presumably not donating the proceeds to charity. But also, like, on top of that, you get in that back and forth of dude, like, the way that's done, to me, that's such a joke that, like, it's like, that's kind of funny on paper, like, that's not too bad, but the way that it's presented, I think, is where you're seeing the boomer airplane guys getting a little bit of these damn kids in there as well. And and so that, it just feels born kind of tired to me. I feel like that was my feeling at the time. But and that's before you get to, a not that funny blowjob joke brought to you by, horsewoman of the apocalypse, Jenny McCarthy. So it's like, it is definitely a snapshot of its time. It's just, I would be willing to bet this movie wouldn't have aged well by the time it made it to DVD, let alone to this day.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's a perfect place to end it. But before we do, Alex, what do you think? Stay for the previews or skip to the feature? Honestly,
well, go ahead, please.
Honestly, I could go either way. There were a couple decent trailers, a couple of meh trailers. So I guess I'll just say it's sort of like you could skip through some of the previews. It wouldn't hurt you to sit through some of them. But if you just want to skip straight to the feature, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, we're talking about my all-time favorite movie, Out of Sight. So any delay in getting to that is not gonna sit well with me. But also, like, it's very telling that Universal didn't really know how to sell this movie when it was in theaters, and that continued. Even though the marketing materials, the original theatrical trailer for Out of Sight and the key art, as I mentioned before, like they definitely gave you the vibe of this movie. And it just it it was a quirk of whatever that it underperformed. But I think that not knowing how to sell it, that pervaded to its home video release. Because if you look at these trailers, that you could argue there is something for everyone, but also something for no one. And none of these movies really aligns with the movie that they appear at the head of. They are just and that, but also it's been a long time since I really sat through the trailers on a physical release. Like I don't have a VCR anymore, and when I do throw on a DVD, I get disproportionately infuriated that I have to sit there and manually skip through the trailers. So these were never a curated experience. Obviously, it wasn't. It's not. It's not algorithmic. It's not. You may also like. It's just here is our slate of theatrical and home video releases that coincide with the time frame of the release of the movie you've just rented or bought, and I get that. But there's no sense from these trailers that they had any sense of the demography of who would be interested in Out of Sight and what would then appeal to them. So you've got an art house, you've got a couple of art house trailers with Buffalo 66 and High Art. You've got a white people tragedy with One True Thing. You've got a teen targeted stoner comedy with Basketball. There's no cohesion there. It's really a grab bag, which says to me that even of the available releases that they could have been hawking at the time, they really did not know what the person interested in Out of Sight, what movie they would be interested in next.
All right, that's fair. So anyway, before we leave, Alex, can we follow you anywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm no longer on Twitter. I am on Blue Sky at atomicgiant.bsky.social. You can also follow my new Instagram page, which is Atomic Giant Industries. I think I have that right. Let me look it up before I promote to your audience. Yes, Atomic Giant Industries, all one word. That's going to be my new home for video design and copywriting content, plus general just funsies. And also, I have recently started a Substack where I do a deep dive on an isolated sequence or element of a movie or a song. It's called 5greatminutes.substack.com. I try for weekly. I usually wind up with bi-weekly. Sometimes it's once a month, but there's no excuse for it. I set myself a challenge that I sometimes live up to. I will be covering a sequence from Out of Sight coming up. Maybe we can coincide around when this episode's going to drop. Little co-pro. But yeah, so that's where you can find me, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, you too. Anyway, this was VHS Era, and next time we'll be doing the last commercially released VHS ever, A History of Violence.
Wow.
Yes. We'll see you then, everyone.